Hey Pete, I just want to welcome you to the Wild Heart Athletics podcast, and I really appreciate you, taking some time this evening to talk to our audience and tell us about yourself and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to diving on in and hearing about you. So I'd appreciate it if you just go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
Hey, I'm Pete McAfee, uh, living in Southern Oregon and just having fun, man. Playing and working and raising a family, and feel like a pretty average, normal dude out here.
I got you. So we were talking a little bit earlier, and tell me you were from Texas and you moved out to Oregon. So I'm really kind of curious, like, was there anything that like really brought you to Oregon or anything like that?
Yeah, there was a big thing that brought me to Oregon. My wife, she brought me out here. She her brother lives in the Bay Area in California, and she wanted to be closer to him, and we went and visited him and his family in California, and I decided it was just a little too crowded and congested. And coming from a smaller town, West Texas, I wasn't sold on moving out there. So I went back home, and she rented a car and drove north all the way to Portland, and decided that Southern Oregon was something I would like. And I moved out here sight unseen, had never seen it. So just trusted that she was going to lead me in the right direction, and she sure did, man. It's the best decision we ever made.
And that's awesome that you guys just kind of pick up and left and did that. That's really unique. A lot of people don't do that nowadays. They kind of just stay where they're from or, move close. And I can understand being there with family. So seeing that you was like sight unseen, what was like the most surprising thing, moving out there?
You know, we moved out here in April of 2009, and driving out here, I remember in Texas, April, you're already getting into summer. It's pretty hot, and you're thinking about playing in the water or whatever. But I remember coming across Highway 140, coming into Medford, and just driving through snow and seeing people on snowmobiles, staging next to the road, getting ready to go play in the mountains. And man, I was blown away. Loved it. Didn't get to play a lot in the snow when I lived in Texas, and I instantly was like, I don't know what it's going to be, whether it's snow skiing or snowmobiling or what, but I got to get into it. So it was beautiful. Prettiest thing I ever saw coming out here.
And that's really awesome. So, coming up from Texas, I can tell that you didn't get into a lot of snow sports. So since you moved out there, have you kind of gotten into a lot of snow sports? And if so, what are those?
Yeah. I got into, I didn't right away though. I started out kind of playing on the lakes and just riding stand-up jet skis, and I ended up getting into more surf stuff and playing out the coast. And then I did get some snowmobiles when I moved out here because I wanted to get into the snow. And I realized that it wasn't actually snowmobiling that I was doing, it was just digging. So I would go out and get a snowmobile stuck, and I would spend hours digging it out and, you know, lifting it out of the hole that I'd got it in. But yeah, it took a while, and I eventually got into snow skiing and mountaineering and ski mountaineering. And that's kind of my main hobbies now that I'm into. But it was a slow progression into it.
I got you. So what was maybe kind of like the little challenging part of like learning the little odds and ends when it came to, snowmobiling and then getting into the mountaineering and, mountaineering with skiing and things like that?
Well, I never did get good at snowmobiling, and I abandoned that after a couple of seasons. But snow skiing, I just working a job at the hospital as a CT tech where I had 7 days on and 7 days off. On that 7 days off, I'd just play every day. So when you can get the reps in, you can get good at about anything, and that's what happened with snow skiing. I just started snow skiing every day, and even on the days I would work, or I guess I should say nights that I was on working, I would go ski during the day before work. So I was skiing, 5 to 7 days a week, and man, just getting those reps in. And Mount Ashland, the local hill, super close to where we live and where we work, it's really steep, and it's got a bowl that's got incredible terrain, really steep, like mandatory drops and chutes and cornices and all kinds of lines in there. And If you took a picture of the bowl on the right day, it looks just like any of these big resorts like Jackson Hole anywhere. But if you pan out a little bit, you realize it's only it's only about 1,000 or I think 1,500 vertical top to bottom. So it's a small resort, but it was a great training ground. It got
That's
me.
awesome. I remember, yeah, I remember my first time. My friend, she moved out to Colorado, and up here in North Carolina, we don't have anything. I think the closest thing is in West Virginia, which is snowshoe, but it's still not comparable to what's out west and like what you kind of find in the Midwest, like Colorado. And I know it was like very shocking the first time I went to a resort. And so, what was it like the first time, kind of like going and trying skiing and stuff like that? And did you have any like funny comical moments as well?
Actually, it went pretty smooth. It felt pretty natural. And I started out on 2 skis. So I should mention I'm a right leg amputee, and I started out skiing with a prosthetic on, and did that for the first season, and it felt pretty natural. And I thought I had a pretty good handle on it. And I was pretty much just skiing like most Texans do, where they just go really fast and they're really not in control. And I ended up, I think it was the first season that I was on skis. I ended up breaking my stump, kind of where it comes out of the prosthetic. It felt like a big cheater pipe, just leverage on the end of that bone. And it snapped it and stuck the bone, poked the bone through the skin, poked a little hole in the skin, and ended up having surgery and not able to wear my prosthetic. And when I went back to skiing, I wasn't cleared yet by the doctor. And I just kind of put a bunch of wooden dowels around my stump and duct taped it up to make sure it was safe, even though it had been internally fixed with a plate and screws and everything. But I started just skiing on 1 ski with normal poles. And that was pretty awkward. That would have been probably the comical part of the whole deal. But I mean, it was a struggle. But I got to where I could get around and get down the mountain. The hard part was just getting back to the lift or through any kind of flat terrain was really difficult, or around the lodge or parking lot. Just trying to hop around in 1 ski boot. But I ran into a guy at Mount Bachelor in Bend, Oregon, and he was a 3-tracker who had outriggers and skied on 1 ski. And he came skiing over to me and basically just said, "Hey, idiot, what are you doing? Go down there and get a pair of these outriggers. It'll change your life." And then he just skied away. Never even got the guy's name. But I followed his advice, went down there, got some outriggers, and man, it did. It changed my life. It made skiing a lot easier. And even without wearing the prosthetic, you may be crutching through the parking lot. It might be kind of hard to carry a ski while you're crutching on outriggers. But the second that you get on the snow and that ski's on your foot, you're just as capable as anybody else on the slopes. And that's what I loved, was that independence and just feeling just like everybody else. And you could charge just as hard as anybody on 1 ski. So.
And that's awesome. I really appreciate you kind of sharing that story. I've never heard of outrigging, the
Yeah,
outrigs that you were talking about. Would you mind like kind of elaborating on that? That's really
yeah,
interesting.
totally. So have you ever seen the arm crutches with the little cuffs that go around your forearm just under the elbow?
Yeah.
Uh, so they look like those, and they've got a ski on the bottom of them, like a really short ski. It doesn't have edges or anything, uh, but it will slide on the snow when it's in ski mode. And you don't really use those necessarily to turn, but for me, it's just kind of like having them out in front of me for balance and kind of like little feelers. If I were to hit like a patch of ice and start to lose my one edge, then I've got something there that I can put weight on that'll might be enough to save me and keep me upright. Uh, and then when you're not skiing with them, when you're just crutching up to the lodge or through the parking lot, you flip those skis up into crutch mode. So if you can imagine standing this little tiny, maybe 12-inch ski, flipping it upright, and on the bottom of it, it's got like some almost like carbide screws that would help grip on ice, or like even asphalt or whatever in the parking lot. And you just crutch around with them just like any pair of like forearm crutches, kind of the European style crutches, you know? So it's a great tool. I don't know who invented it or came up with it, but Enabling Technologies is the brand that I use. And uh, man, I love them. It was a game changer.
Man, that's incredible that they have stuff like that for people that might need it, or like, like you said, when you don't use, because you're not using your prosthetic. So kind of what's been like your progression from getting into skiing, and then you're talking about mountaineering and alpine skiing and stuff like that. So what was that progression like for you? And then do you use kind of the same setup you were just talking about, or is that your setup kind of different?
I will wear a prosthetic, and man, there has been years of changing and modifying and adapting my setup. It wasn't just a one and done, like, oh, this is it, I'm backcountry skiing. It was years and years and years of trial and error. And almost every year, I end up modifying or tweaking something in my kit. Uh, I, I mean, it feels pretty dialed now, but there's always room for improvement. So as far as backcountry setup goes, I used to just snowshoe everywhere, carry my ski on my back, on my backpack, and I was that guy out there, snowshoeing around that people on skims hate. And I would get to the top of whatever I was going up, and once it got steep, snowshoes aren't great. I would just post hole in snow or use crampons if it was firm or icy, and climb to the top, throw my snowshoes in my backpack, throw my prosthetic on the outside of my backpack usually, and just strap it to it. And I would ski down on one ski with my outriggers. Now, on the way up, I would use the outriggers. I would hold them just like normal ski poles, not actually wearing them on my arms like crutches. Uh, and over the years, tons of adaptation and everything. I've tried skinning on two skis, which is great in deep snow, but then I have to carry one ski down on my back, which is terrible when you get into the trees. Uh, you end up snagging tree limbs, which has happened. But I've come to this system now that I like the best. I've made like a ski mountaineering foot. I basically cut the bottom of a solid like plug ski boot off, sent it off to cast, had them put inserts in it, the tech toe inserts, and bolted that thing to just a really firm Category 5 prosthetic foot. Just whatever I could find and beg for at the local prosthetic shops, something that they was going to get junked anyway, uh, and just bolted it to it. It's that simple, and also glued things too. But basically, what that did is having that ski boot sole on the bottom of just the skeleton of a prosthetic foot allowed me to just every tool would fit now, so I could put crampons on it. You know, uh, verts. If people know what verts are, they're like a climbing specific snowshoe that go on with a toe bail and a heel lever, just like an automatic crampon would. And then I can put any tool on it that way. And I also like to carry a drift plank. So drift plank is like a little approach ski. It's lightweight carbon little mini ski with a permanently fixed skin on it that can fit in your backpack when you take it off. So I can skin with that on my prosthetic foot, and then I just use an actual ski with an AT setup with a removable skin for my uphill downhill ski on my left foot. So I'll have to send you some pictures because I'm sure it's hard to visualize, but that's been the system I'm using right now.
No, man, I appreciate you explaining that too, because like it's really cool to see how like over the years, you just configured and adapted to like the best system, right? And sometimes it just depends on what the situation calls for. And what I think is really cool is, and for our listeners too, they probably don't know, and I have kind of a general idea, but when you get into like mountaineering, it's sometimes it's a combination of climbing, hiking, to get up to a top area. And so, has there ever been any like big objectives you've done, or do you kind of just go out and do stuff that you can do in a day, or is it kind of mixed?
You know, I've done some bigger objectives. I do a lot of day objectives around here. Mount McLaughlin is the highest peak in Southern Oregon. I think it's like 9,500 feet, which probably doesn't sound like much to most listeners, but it's got a pretty long approach. In the winter, you end up making it like a 15-mile day, I think it is. And it's a great mountain, and the elevation gain is, in the winter, the way I like to do it, you can do a 5,000 foot day vertical. So, but that's kind of my backyard, usually day missions. Sometimes I'll go out to the northeast side of the mountain, or even the north, and set a camp and stay for a few days and do different ridges or different objectives as far as the climbing route goes, to summit and ski down. Now, I've also got Shasta close by, which is awesome. It's second highest in the Cascade Range. I think it's like 14,179 feet or something like that. It's just a couple hundred feet shorter than Mount Rainier. It's got I want to say, it might have 7 glaciers on it still, I think, but it's a great training ground for bigger mountains. And it's awesome because you start at about 6,900 feet. So it's a big elevation gain. That one, I've done everything from day trips on it to snow camping for a week, and just hitting different objectives around the mountain. But those are kind of the shorter objectives, and you can do them in day missions if you want to. Now, doing a lot of the Cascades, I've done most of the Cascades in Oregon and Southern Washington. Uh, and the bigger that got me thinking about bigger objectives. It's actually kind of a funny story. My buddy Eric and Stein, a couple of guys I was climbing with on Shasta, we did an awesome ascent of Shasta and got powder turns. And I mean, it was a lot of like slogging through deeper snow and post holing, because it was too steep to really, and difficult to skin. We thought it might just be easier just to boot straight up it in deeper snow, which we did. And we made a really fast ascent of it for the conditions. And it was just a heinous workout too. But we got up close to the summit plateau, close to 14,000 feet, and we're taking a break, eating some Trader Joe's dried mangoes. And my buddy Eric said, "Dude, like, have you ever thought about climbing Denali?" And for listeners who might not know, Denali is the highest peak on the North American continent, formerly known as Mount McKinley. And I was like, just suffering, but I was sitting up there just exhausted, like, feeling the elevation. And I was like, no, man, I had never thought about Denali. That seems a little out of my league. And when I got back home that evening, sitting on the comfort of the sofa, eating good food and feeling good because you're back down, 1,000 feet above sea level. And I was like, maybe Denali would be an option, like that would be pretty cool. Maybe we should think about that. And that, I think I called him just a day later, or maybe even that day, and was like, dude, let's do Denali. Let's go do it. So yeah, that Denali was my first big expedition, real expedition that I did, and did it with a group of friends, and we did it unguided. And one of the guys that went with us was Vasu Sojitra, also an amputee. And me and Vasu and my buddies unguided, me and Vasu we all made it to the top, and me and Vasu became the first amputees to ever ski to descend Denali. So that was a pretty wild trip. But
Man, that sounds wild, Pete. That's incredible too that you guys did that. That's awesome.
yeah, it was pretty unbelievable, actually. I mean, like, if you look at it, like the odds of actually an able-bodied mountaineer who actually knows what he's doing, the odds of him succeeding on that mountain are 50% or less. on most years. And like, yeah, the fact that we pulled it off first shot and dealing with some weather, I mean, it's one of those things. It was an incredible story and an incredible objective and an incredible experience. But there was a lot of luck involved and a lot of learning that went into that. I mean, with learning on the fly and not just talking technical stuff, but up till that point, I'd kind of been a lot more individualistic with climbing. I'd done a lot more solo missions, and when I was with friends, it was more of just kind of a, oh, I mean, pretty loose. Like everybody, could do whatever they wanted to do. It was kind of their own objective. We were trying to be safe or whatever, but most of the time, if conditions were safe, I wasn't waiting on anybody, and I was trying to set a new PR up this mountain. You know what I mean? And not really concerned about what was going on with my friends. And through that trip, I kind of learned a lot about team dynamic and why it's important to not just go cowboy out there and that really focus on the group and what's working. And we have to work well as a team and a unit. It really changed my mindset on that trip. But yeah, that was big learning experience, and that was first expedition style objective, and it's one that, man, I've learned more from that trip than I have any other. I've done some other big objectives too. Climbed some high altitude volcanoes in Ecuador, and then just most recently, this last February, went and climbed Aconcagua in Argentina, which is the highest peak outside of the Himalayas. So it's the highest in the Western and the Southern hemispheres.
Pete, man, you're just crushing it, aren't you? That's awesome.
I don't know, man. I feel like it's crushing me most of the time when I'm out there, but it's good times. I love being out and love a good challenge, and that's what those bigger objectives are. So, and maybe I'm actually just lazy, because those big objectives, my favorite thing about them is you move really slow and you have a lot of rest days. So
I got you. That's something I definitely want to dive into. But first, I really want to know, what was it like, topping out Denali, like getting to the top?
honestly, for me, I mean, you would think that there would be a lot of excitement on the summit and sense of accomplishment and, some sort of joy or happiness. I had none of those things up there. It was a completely different experience for me. We definitely, I would say, made some pretty questionable decisions summiting when we did. We summited, kind of threaded the needle summiting during a storm. And I was pretty concerned about my teammates with like some frost injuries, some cold injuries going on up there, and the fact that it was flat light and snowing pretty hard and visibility was low, and we were about to try to ski something that can't see real well, and knowing the conditions on the way up was a lot of blue ice that now had snow stacking up on it, a lot of open crevasses and things. I mean, I was first terrified when we did finally make the summit, and then I just had this overwhelming feeling of dread that that not all of us were going to make it off that mountain. It was one of those things where, yeah, it was pretty heavy, and I kind of had to just come to terms with the only way that I could handle it and move forward was to come to terms with my own mortality, and just accept the fact that I might not make it down, and that my friends might not make it down. And once I kind of accepted that, I was able to move forward and just focus on what was in my control and that next step. But luckily, I mean, it all worked out. We all made it down alive and without any serious permanent damage. So, yeah, it like I say, Denali was a big one, and it was a big learning experience. And, I don't wish that I had that experience that everyone else does, where they get the great views and, the sense of accomplishment and everyone's high-fiving each other, because the experience I had was, I feel like, a lot more meaningful and something that'll stick with me, and just a real learning experience. So and we still pulled it off, and it made for a pretty good story. So
Yeah, it's an incredible story. I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome. And I like how you said it makes it more meaningful, like with all the struggles you guys had to go through, right? And then, the big thing coming to terms with mortality and having to push through. Like a lot of people don't get to experience that or even know what that is because you just hear about it in books, but you've actually lived it.
oh yeah, yeah, no, it was incredible, and I'm grateful for it. So for sure, and the fact that we all came away the way it played out and things, because man, I didn't think it was going to go that way there for a while.
So, do you think that like accomplishing that big objective has now just like instilled in you that you just like want more, you want to go do more, you want to go do bigger objectives?
You know, I mean, it was one of those things where I didn't want Denali to be the biggest thing I ever climbed, in kind of a figurative meaning. I mean, I was okay if I didn't ever go higher than that altitude wise, but I definitely wanted to look for the next challenge. I spent, that was in 2021 that I did Denali, and this is 2024 now. So I spent 3 years just working hard, grinding, training, trying to progress my skills in the mountains, trying to spend as much time as I could and carry heavy packs and train like I was training for Denali, which hands down to date is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, it was a total beatdown. For people who have been there, I'm sure uh, everyone I've talked to has the same experience, as far as it's just a Herculean effort to pull off Denali, just with the sheer amount of weight you have to carry and everything. But but yeah, I spent 3 years training for the next thing and trying to kind of line up the next mission, and things would fall through. Either the people that I wanted to be on my team, we couldn't align our schedules, or whatever it was, something always kind of fell through on it. And this last, actually, there was one thing between now and then that I did, and it was the same year I did Denali, and that's kind of a funny story. We can get into it if you want to.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
all right, right after Denali, uh, waiting on our flight out of Alaska to go home and go our separate ways, me and my buddies, we ran into LP, who works for ROMP. It's the Range of Motion Project, and that organization provides prosthetic care and prosthetics for underserved communities in North and South America. It's a great thing. If anybody's looking to donate money to somebody, that's where I'd go. But LP works for them, and they were organizing this climb in Ecuador that was going to be composed of able-bodied individuals and amputees working together to climb Cotopaxi and some of the other hikes around there too. But Cotopaxi's, I think, 19,000 something feet volcano, and she was like, "Hey, would you and Vasu like to do this?" And we had just come off of Denali, been out there living on the mountain and just struggling to survive for, 16 days. I think we summited on day 16 and did a solid 24-hour push to get out and try to get ahead of that storm. But on the 17th day, but we were worked, and we looked like we were worked. I went into Denali weighing about 165 pounds, and I came off the mountain weighing 135 pounds. So physically did detriment. I was limping around. I could barely walk because my knee and my hip and my back hurt so bad. Uh, and she's like, "Hey, do you guys want to go climb Cotopaxi with us?" And I was like, "Man, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I could do that right now. I'm destroyed. But another one of those deals, I got back home to the comfort of my own home, and said, "Man, what a huge opportunity. How would I say no to that?" Called her. There was still a spot, and got to go climb Cotopaxi with some amazing people, uh, able-bodied and amputee, and you know, it was incredible. Such a cool experience. Got to climb with Carl Egloff. I don't know if you know who Carl is, but he holds FKTs on a lot of the biggest mountains around the world. He's an incredible dude and the most humble, nicest guy you'd ever meet. I mean, it's funny. Like I was kind of starstruck when I first met him, but uh, you know, he's so humble. He's easy to be around and get to know, and it was just everybody I climbed with. It was a real privilege and honor. But that was a cool trip.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. So how was it going down there and being with like able-bodied and other like, amputees?
It was really cool. Really cool just to see everybody working together as one unit. We did split off into, I was on a 3-man team. Myself and Dave Krupa, who's a also I believe right lower leg amputee, and then our guide Darwin. So just the three of us on our team. But man, it was incredible, and hearing everybody's stories and their experiences and their backgrounds and why they were there and what it meant to them to be there and what they were climbing for. Everybody, kind of had their own mountain that they were trying to summit. So it was just a really cool thing to see everybody come together, total strangers, and get to know each other so well on that trip and work well together. It's one of those deals on expeditions. Typically, you can be at each other's throats a lot. There's usually you're under a lot of stress, and that kind of comes out, and people don't get along all the time. But that was one expedition that I didn't see that at all in that entire group of people. Everybody was very kind, very compassionate, and very eager to help one another to accomplish the mission. And if there was no animosity between anybody. It was pretty cool. So that's one thing that I remember that just stood out.
Yeah, that's a big thing to like stand out and see that because you don't have that a lot, like you said, depending on what you're doing. You get a little bit of the bickering because everybody's tired, but seeing
Mm-hmm.
how like, people came together to help one another, that's human nature and it's like purest form.
And I think part of what helped with that trip is with that dynamic is we were raising money for ROMP. So we had all been fundraising leading up to it. Man, I want to say that we raised like $100,000, our team, that went directly to patients, directly to helping with provide prosthetics and prosthetic care to patients. Uh, so that was one thing where usually when you're on these expeditions and you're climbing a mountain, mountaineering is very, very selfish. It's a selfish sport. You're doing it for yourself, and you're having to neglect your family to leave and go do these things, and it's very selfish. And that trip felt like we were actually climbing for something good, and I think that probably had a lot to do with why we all felt the way we did and why it went the way we did, because we were working towards a bigger objective than just climbing this mountain. We were climbing to raise money to help people. So it was cool.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, $100,000. That'll go really far, especially for an organization like that that's helping provide prosthetics, which I've been told is sometimes a hassle and sometimes hard to get, depending on what's going on and your injuries and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, definitely. Yeah, no, it was super cool, man. Real one of the coolest trips I've ever been on for sure. Uh, yeah, and compared to Denali, man, I mean, we actually summited in a storm on that one too. But I've got this thing where every climb I'm on or whatever, I tell them I'm like, hey, I hope you're not here for the great summit experience, because that just doesn't happen with me. The weather always turns. We always have to find a way to make it happen. It's never a clean shot, and I didn't get any of the views on top of that one either. It was just socked in and snowing, and we were getting rimed up with ice. So it was but it was a great experience, and it was definitely, man, it was a cakewalk compared to Denali. So that was awesome. I was pleasantly surprised because I was pretty nervous going into it, and with the weather and everything on that summit day, I was thinking, oh man, this is happening again, and it all went really, really smooth and a lot safer and easier that time.
So what you're saying is you're the storm magnet, is what I'm hearing throughout these stories.
I am. That's it. but
Well,
but
Pete,
my
yeah.
success rate is good. So we usually make it to the top, and everybody's made it down, but it's not going to be the funnest experience.
Yeah, the fun stops here, but we'll succeed. So that's the main thing.
Yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. Pete, man, these are some amazing stories here. I really appreciate you sharing it. I'm really enjoying learning all this. And, I really would love to now kind of dive into like how you prepared for these trips and like what your training's like. Cause, I know you got, I'm sure there's a lot of like maybe some endurance training, strengthening, but then you also, it's skill set too, right? Because you're climbing, you're hiking, you're skiing. That those are also require skills. So I'd love to,
Mhm.
if you wouldn't mind, just kind of diving in and telling us about your training and preparation.
Yeah. As far as the skills go, just being out there and training and preparing in the mountains, uh, the skills will come and that takes care of itself. If you have something you need to work on, you can always find resources or, uh, get out with a guide who has those skills who can help you progress yours. That all kind of came easy and comes really easy. You can rig up a hall in your backyard and just practice rigging up 3-to-1s or 5-to-1s and, you know, pulling a nice chest full of weights up, practicing like a crevasse rescue. That can all be done. You can practice that and drill that, and that all works. But as far as physical fitness goes, that's probably hands down the number one factor in people not succeeding in these objectives. So, uh, and man, I put in a lot of work with that. I never feel like I'm in good enough shape, but I'm constantly training to try and be prepared. Uh, so as far as training for one of those big objectives goes, um, it's just a lot of walking, dude. A lot of walking, a lot of like zone 2 and zone 3 cardio. So stuff where you can carry on a conversation, and I usually am just carrying a backpack, and I've got this little mountain that you can see out my window called Roxanne Peak. It's about 1,000 foot vertical, and just a few miles or whatever, maybe between 3 and 4 round trip. Uh, but it does have some really steep sections, and pretty much I just go up there and I carry rocks in a backpack, uh, up and down that mountain and just try and get in shape. I'll do that every day. Uh, Obviously, I'll have some rest days at some point when I need them. If I start getting skin breakdown or sores on my stump, then I'll switch up my training and I'll hop on stationary bikes or whatever I can do where I can let that heal. But ideally, it's just carrying a backpack and doing it every day, just getting those reps in. And I try to make sure that I would go spend at least, a few hours doing that every day before work. And then usually 1 to 2 times a week, I would go do a bigger day where I would do, sometimes multiple laps on Shasta. Sometimes it would be 16 miles, sometimes it would be 20 miles, but try to do 1 or 2 big days, uh, just a long, low cardio zone day, just trying to put hours in the bank. But that's the best advice. And if I don't have time to get out and do that, and life happens and things get busy, then I would go to the gym and do about an hour of HIIT training, high intensity interval training, like a cardio circuit, uh, and monitoring heart rate, uh, which I think that's important too. We talk a lot about endurance training, kind of what I was doing, the low cardio endurance, but we don't talk as much about HIIT training. You need that too. You need to make sure that you can you know what it feels like to rev your heart up to a high rate and try to hold that for a little bit and know how you're going to react and how your body's going to react. And it was important to do that too, I guess I should say. So, and then a little bit of weight training mixed in also, because you need your joints strong, and those muscles are going to protect those joints and might save you from spraining or straining something out there, which would be a disaster, you know. So a little bit of everything, but pretty much just doing something every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think you explained that perfectly, right? Like, you're very sport specific when it comes to basically hiking every day and walking. And you said the zone two, getting that aerobic capacity going. But, I really like how you added in the high intensity training, just getting that heart rate up. And
Mm-hmm.
then the gym is definitely important. But what I think is really good to point out is the specificity that you use for training, because, I mean, that's how you get better, and you can take, 60, 70, 80, maybe 100 pounds up,
Mm-hmm.
1,000+ feet, or, if it's 9,000, then like you said, 14,000 was one that you did before too. So that's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
walking and a lot of gear you got to lug.
It is. And I'll tell you, you know, 75 pounds is what I like to train with, 75-pound pack. And if you're thinking about doing Denali, I mean, you can't really go a whole lot heavier than that because you risk injury. But man, get comfortable with 75 pounds, because on Denali, there's a good chance you're going to be carrying more than that even. So it's, at least we did. It was astronomical. And Denali, we actually filmed it to document that first ever adaptive ski descent. And me and my buddies, with all the camera gear and all the solar panels and the laptops and the external hard drives and all the stuff we needed to film. So a normal expedition, you've got, each person's going to be moving about 100 pounds up the mountain, okay? And you're going to have days where you do double carry and you carry half that up 3,000 feet and cache it and come back down and sleep and carry the other half up the next day. Well, 100 pounds is normal, the amount of weight you need to move up the mountain. So for us, with all the camera gear and all our stuff and everything, we were averaging between 175 pounds per person worth of gear to 200 pounds. It was, I mean, people, guides, or anybody that knows anything about it, looked at us and said, "Man, you guys aren't very smart. You're not going to make it very far." But we somehow managed to pull it off. So
Yeah, and that's a lot. 200 pounds, 175 to 200. It's a lot. I think the most I've ever had to hike with is 100. So, man, good on you. But so you guys said you document it. So was that just you, or is there like an actual documentary out there people can go and actually watch and see this?
we sold some of the footage to Warren Miller Entertainment, who used it in their film Winter Starts Now. Uh, so we sold non-exclusively some footage. They used our footage for a segment in that ski film, which was super cool. We are working on a documentary. We'll see if it ever comes to fruition. We've been working really hard on it. I should say my buddy Eric has been working really hard on it, and we pitched it to some big names, and we've got some big names helping us on it. And we'll see. Hopefully soon. Hopefully in the future there will actually be a full-length documentary with the Denali footage. So I'll let you know if that ever comes out.
Yeah, man, dude, I'm looking forward to it. That would be great to see that, and then to just do another interview too down the road about that. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
really cool. You got to be a part of that, and it's like awesome that I get to meet you. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
for sure, man. Like I say, we'll see if anything ever comes of it, but we've been making a lot of headway with it. It seems like it's really close, so I'm optimistic it'll happen.
Awesome. Oh, dude, I'm optimistic too. It will definitely happen. I mean, that's an incredible story, right? Like you said, it's the first amputees to make it up to Denali. That's a big deal.
Yeah, well, other amputees have climbed it, but none of them have ever ski descended it. So we were the first one
Oh,
to
okay.
ski descend it. So yeah, but it was cool, and it's a great story too. So, but yeah, and going back to the training and talking about hit training, and And I guess, we focus a lot on the you know, long-term endurance thing, slow endurance thing. But man, this last year on Aconcagua, there was a point where if we were going to succeed with the high winds and the cold and the weather, we were going to have to move really fast. And man, I was so glad that I had been conditioned uh, with hit training to know how to react and how that high heart rate's going to feel, because I guarantee if I was wearing a fitness band or something when we were doing our summit push on Aconcagua, I would have had you know a new PR for a high heart rate, because it was the hardest, fastest I've ever moved at that elevation. And I mean, my heart was beating so fast. I have no idea what it was. I hit 188, 189 beats per minute when I'm doing hit training all the time, and Aconcagua was a whole nother level, man. It was beating out of my chest, and I've never been sucking wind that hard. So yeah, it was good to be prepared and good to focus some on that too.
Well, yeah, like you said, you add that elevation element in, and then depending on how many days into the thing you are, you're maybe a little bit tired too, because you're going in elevation. You're already so far in, you've burned so many calories. So yeah, that's a big thing. But that's really, I mean, you're really intelligent about like your preparation, which is great when it comes to your training. I mean, everything's solid.
Yeah, yeah. No, I try hard, and it's one of those things I probably should jump on a program. I know a lot of other guys that get on a lot of the different mountaineering specific programs, but I'm cheap and I just hadn't spent the money to hire a trainer or anything. I just have my own kind of fitness program lined out and know that I also am going to have to be flexible with it. So if there's a day where I can't get out and spend 3 hours hiking, then guess what? I can go to the gym and do at least an hour of hit training followed by an hour of weight training. uh, and if I'm at work, sometimes I'll hang a chin up bar on a doorway, and one of those dangerous sketchy little things that hangs on a doorway, and every time I walk through that door I'll do 10 chin ups and drop down and do 20 push ups, and by the end of the shift I might have done 300 chin ups, and it works. At least you're getting it in somehow. You know what I mean? Getting some fitness in. Just if life gets busy and you can't get it in that day, don't think you failed. Don't fall off. Just do what you can. There's always something you can do.
Yeah, I mean that's perfect, right? It's what you can do within that day, because you not only do you work, the job, and then you're training for this, but like you said, you have a family, which means you got a spouse, I'm sure, so you got to make sure you're spending time with them too, and also prepping. So, and I really loved how you put it, when you said don't really be hard on yourself if you don't do something, or because you didn't go maybe hike 3 hours, but at least you did something, right? Like, you're at work, you're doing the push-ups and the chin-ups. Something is better than nothing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Just always be training, right? That's
Yeah.
it. Even if it seems insignificant, always be training. What can you do? But yeah.
Yep. Consistency is key. And so, kind of going into consistency is key, what is your recovery like with all the training and all the stuff that you do and activities?
I'm really, really bad at recovery. That's one thing that I tend to just try to go, 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 and never have a down day until I just kind of explode. and I did make myself training for Aconcagua. I figured out, because going back to Denali, one of the mistakes I made was I didn't allow any recovery days leading up to that. And when I got to Alaska, I was already having some issues like joint pain, knee pain, hip pain, because I'd just been overtraining, and it wasn't the best way to start an expedition off. So Aconcagua training, I would give myself a week off, or 4 days off, about every month. I would just take off and say, all right, I might I might be walking or whatever, but I'm not carrying a heavy pack. I'm not going to the gym. I'm just gonna go do fun stuff, go paddleboard, go to the lake, go to the river. I can hike with my family, but I'm not doing a big ruck where I'm carrying a lot of weight. And that would be my recovery time. And consistently, I'll admit, like, you did feel better after those 4 days when you got back to training. Usually you were better than you were when you stopped. So recovery, I'm realizing how important it is. It's something I just used to neglect, and I would just keep hammering through. Plus, I enjoy being in the mountains. So on my days off, historically, it it was basically training, even if I didn't want to call it that, because I was out backcountry skiing or climbing or hiking. So uh, actually physically making yourself take some time off and rest and recover is key. The other thing with the recovery is I can thank my wife for this. It's all her. Like, I eat really good. We try to eat really clean. We try to make sure that we're not putting a ton of processed foods in our body. If you read the ingredient list and it's got stuff that we can't pronounce and we don't know what it is, we don't get it. We put it back. So I feel like eating really clean uh, is also huge, and you will recover a lot faster if you're eating really clean consistently like that. So yeah, that's kind of that's what I got for recovery.
No, yeah, and you described it perfectly, right? You're active. It's an active recovery. Like, you're still doing stuff. You're still doing activities because, at the end of the day, blood's going to heal. So, like, you're just getting the blood moving, but you're staying active. That's the key. I think a lot of people sometimes are like, oh, recovery, I'm just going to sit around and watch some TV. It's like, well, if you're actually more active, that's actually going to be a whole lot better. And then I love how you brought in the fact of nutrition and like telling us about how well you guys eat and how clean it is. I mean, a lot of people don't do that. And so on top of, like, it sounds like you guys have good nutrition. So do you take any like supplements or anything like that? Or are you kind of just like, nah, my food intake is good enough?
Man, I supplement. I do supplement. Yeah. Uh, I really like supplements. I'm on and off with multivitamins. So I'll do a multivitamin for usually in the winter, through the winter, and then sometimes I'll stop doing multivitamins through the summer. And I don't know. It's one of those things that depends on what you want to look up online that tells you it's good for you, and some tell you it's bad because then you're not getting it out of the food that you eat as easy. Your body gets used to getting it from that pill. But multivitamins on and off. I do take supplements with turmeric and glucosamine and chondroitin and things because I do have a lot of joint issues and back issues, but it's really nothing to complain about, and I can work through it. But that all seems to help me. So I've got kind of a regimen of that with krill oil. Yeah, no, I've got definitely. I like supplements, man, and I like protein too. I like to take protein for recovery. But yeah, no, I like to play with supplements and nootropics. I'm kind of getting into that, and functional mushrooms. Uh, I'm enjoying the adaptogens and just stuff that helps my brain feel like it's working better too. So it's not all just physical, how I feel, it's cognition as well. Um, so one other thing that I started trying was low doses of creatine. So, and this is not popular I think it's more popular in like the bodybuilding, like gym rat kind of world. But what I've kind of found, and I don't do like a loading phase to try and get a ton of it in me and like swell up or anything, but I feel like creatine has been helping me to recover quicker. Uh, and I'll split the dose out for the day to where I'm taking it, a half dose or a quarter dose 4 times a day to get that one dose. And spreading it out like that, I feel like I haven't gained the water weight like people always say they do with creatine, but I feel like and it may be a placebo effect, maybe it's just in my head, but I do feel like I recover faster when I'm on that. and I do cycle off of it because you don't want to, I guess, stay on it too long for ATP production. You don't want your body to stop producing ATP because I know it ups it when you're taking creatine, so your energy levels are better too. But but yeah, I don't know, man. I like supplements, so
No, I hear it. Yeah, I think speaking of creatine, I'm on a cycle right now myself, which I don't do it often. But yeah, it's a really good, it's like I think what a lot of people don't understand is creatine has been the most researched supplement in ages. I mean, there's research that goes back like almost decades, if not longer, about creatine and like what it does to the body. So I think it's a great supplement to have, like you said, and cycle it just because you get that like extra phosphocreatine that it does, especially when it comes to your high intensity training sessions, and then also aid in recovery. And I think the biggest thing too is, you mentioned that your nutrition's on point, but having that extra protein is really going to help,
mm-hmm.
especially with like all the stuff you're doing. I mean, if you're going out and hiking 3 or 4 hours, depending on what your schedule is that day, and you're, humping basically with 50, 75, maybe even more pounds, that's a lot. And you're not only are you doing endurance, but you're also tearing your muscles. And so having that extra protein is going to help.
Totally. And getting a lot of collagen too, man. I do a lot of the good collagen to help with joints. I don't know if it works or not, but man, I'm trying to make my knee last as long as I can because I only got one good one, and it's gotta last at least a little bit longer. So
I hear you, man. I'm right there with you. So, well, that's awesome, dude. Thanks for like sharing like all your training and nutrition and supplement. That's really cool. I like that you're like, I'm a supplement guy. I think that's awesome.
oh, I love them, man. I love them. So and like I say, I don't know if they really work, but I think I feel better when I'm on them. So that's good enough for me.
Yeah, that's the main thing, right? You feel better, right? And you're staying active, so you're like hitting all the buckets you need to hit to maintain a healthy lifestyle. So you're crushing as far as I'm concerned, I guess. From coming from a future PT standpoint, I'm like, you're a perfect patient.
Nice, nice. That's not what doctors
um,
usually tell me. Usually my docs say I'm a horrible patient, man.
yeah, right. That's all right. I don't have the doc title yet, so we're good.
Yeah, nice.
So something you mentioned earlier, and I'd really love to kind of go down that rabbit hole if you want, is you said that mountaineering is a like selfish sport, especially when it comes to like family and things like that. And so, would you be willing to kind of go down that road and kind of explain what you meant by that, like how it's selfish? Because I mean, I know you have. I'm confident you spend time with your family and things like that, but like, could we explore that a little bit if you're okay with that?
Yeah, totally. And man, it is really tough when you're training for a big objective, especially when it's coming up. Uh, it that training it takes you away from your family, and no matter what you do, I mean, I try to go if I'm training, I try to go hiking with them, because I can throw on more weight to slow myself down and go hike with the kids and wife. You know what I mean? To where I'm not running off and leaving them. That way, I'm working hard, still getting to work out. But that only goes so far. I mean, it's ultimately you're taking you're spending your time away from the family with training. I know leading up to Denali, I was spending a lot of times 5 out of 7 days snow camping and just dragging a pulk out in the woods and snow camping and getting comfortable snow camping and climbing mountains just by myself. And at that time, I didn't even have an inReach or anything, so I didn't have cell service, and they wouldn't hear from me for 5 days. Uh, so it is. I mean, ultimately, I feel like it is a really selfish sport, and no matter how you want to word it or look at it, a guy like me with wife and kids, I am neglecting my family when I'm getting ready for these things, and then I'm gone, and I'm out on the mountain or whatever the objective is, and you prepare for being out for about 25 days on some of these expeditions, and yeah, it's amazing that my wife is as supportive as she is, because without her, I wouldn't be able to do this stuff at all. And it's, it is incredibly selfish, but then the good side of it, I guess, to look at the positive points of it is, you explain to them why it's important to you to do this, to take yourself out there, to be uncomfortable, to try and do something that you don't actually know if you're going to be able to do. Uh, it's good to show your kids that, you know, you can dream big and you can work hard and you can accomplish those things that you want to accomplish. And it doesn't matter if you're an amputee, it doesn't matter uh, if you're some guy from Texas who didn't grow up doing this. Uh, you can do what you want to do if you put in the work, and there may be obstacles, but that's the beauty of life, man, is navigating those challenges and finding a way to overcome and adapt and succeed. And yeah, it's selfish in one regard, but in another, I think it's important to teach these lessons to your kids and lead by example and show them what you're doing so that they can go on and achieve great things in their life and do what they want to do. So there's pros and cons, uh, but that's it.
So because like, going and doing these objectives and mountaineering, like it holds a special place in your life. Do you think by going and doing that, even though, maybe you describe it as selfish, it still like makes you be more present when you're there, and it's like it has had a positive impact on your life, especially when it comes to your personal life?
Yeah, and it's going to sound cliche, but I mean the mountains are chock full of life lessons. Let's be realistic, uh, the things you learn out there, they definitely do carry over to your personal life. You experience things out there that are really really stressful and really heavy, and when you come back home, maybe the little things that used to frustrate you or that you used to get angry about or fly off the handle, they don't bother you as much. Uh, it may be a strange correlation. It may be hard to kind of word it, but everyone has things that weigh on them and stresses in their life, and I've seen things in the medical field that uh, it was hard to carry. Uh, and when you go on these big expeditions, I don't know what it is about it, but just being away from technology, off your phones, off your devices, away from TV, in an environment that's extremely harsh, where every move that you make every single day is centered around uh, climbing and surviving, and that's it. That's the only two things that you have in your life for that few weeks while you're out. Uh, Even the rest days is focused around climb and survive. Uh, and when you come back home, it feels like a reset. And some of those heavy things that maybe you've experienced in life, it feels like they kind of go away. I don't know. It's something that maybe you meditate on and you think about while you're out there without even realizing it. But uh, for me, it kind of helps me to come to peace with that stuff. So I definitely feel like it makes me a better person every time I come back. I come back a better person. I learn things out there, and I also learn to let things go. So uh, it's good for the soul, and everything sounds cliche, but man, everything in the mountains, it's chocked full of life lessons.
Yeah, maybe it sounds cliche, but at the same time, it's true though. Like how you feel, and I've definitely noticed that too. Especially when I got into rock climbing, I noticed definitely a difference, some lesson I brought from that sport into my life. And you mentioned lessons. So, like, what are some lessons that you've kind of taken from the mountains and spending time out there into your life?
Well, uh, I've kind of figured out, you know, you you can attribute a lot of stuff to getting lucky, but uh, in the mountains especially, but you set yourself up to get lucky. And that's one thing that I like to preach a lot to people is, uh, you know, don't just sit there and hope that an opportunity is going to come along or hope that something's going to happen and steer your life a certain direction. You have to set yourself up to get lucky. I mean, uh, Denali was a prime example of that when the storm was coming and we were sitting around at, 14,000 foot camp and, trying, everybody was thinking, it's time to bail pretty much. Like we're running out of food and, uh, we tried, but it was one of those things where it was like, well, what if we move up the fixed lines? Fixed lines are set up to the ridge that takes us to 17,000 feet. We can climb up that in a ping pong ball, right? You don't have to be able to see to get up those fixed lines. Anybody can take a Jumar and jug up those things. And once you're on the ridge, even if you can't see, there's no overhead hazard. It's about a 3,000 foot drop off either side of it, and the thing is about 3 feet wide tops. So you can't get lost on it. There's no way to get lost. It spits you out at a good flat spot at 17 where you can dig in and wait a storm out if you have to. It's not the best spot in the world to be, but it would be survivable. And maybe you go on half rations just in case the storm goes a little longer and it's not going to be comfortable and it's going to be cold and you're going to be hungry. But guess what? If you're sitting at 17 and there's a hole in the storm and there's a window to summit, you're in a much better spot to get lucky if that presents itself and strike for the summit. And you can apply that to life with all sorts of scenarios, whether it be financial or anything. It's people can say what they want, and when they see somebody make it, they say, oh, they just got lucky, but they don't see what the person did to set themselves up to get lucky. So I always tell everybody, set yourself up to get lucky. And that goes for whether you're on the mountain or just in your normal life.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it, right? Like you're setting yourself up for the luck to get lucky. And that's kind of the way the world is now, especially with like social media and stuff like that. We see all these people and it's like, oh, they're so lucky. It's like, okay, but you didn't see the 5 years before. They just happened to get one big hit, and then like, we're sitting here talking about your training. It's like, Pete, we're hearing the story about Denali, but no one was there with you when you were going out by yourself and training, and no one was there when you were going on your hikes to get ready for it. So that was a great way to explain it. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
And kind of diving into that, you're talking about lessons and things you learn. You mentioned earlier, like it's important to pick a team or you're going to pick people that you trust. And how important and maybe what kind of qualities do you look for in people that you're going to go do these big adventures with? And do you take that same kind of mentality when it comes to the people you surround yourself with?
Yeah, definitely. It's super important who goes with you on these things. You have to trust them. You have to have a good working dynamic, good friendship. I mean, it's one of those things like you it doesn't matter if you summit and come back. The most important thing is not the summit. It's coming back alive, and it's coming back together, and it's coming back friends. Because you can go on an expedition and it can ruin friendships and relationships, right? If you don't do it right, and if you're not with the right crew. But things I look for are experienced individuals, people that don't have big egos, people that are gonna understand that everybody's gonna have a bad day and everybody's gonna have a good day, and everybody's gonna have some of both of those days. So if I'm having a bad day, I want somebody that's gonna understand, hey, Pete's just having a bad day. He's bonking, and we're gonna help him out. And in the same respect that when they have a bonk or a bad day, that I'm gonna pick up their weight and do the same thing. Not be the guy with the ego that looks at them and gets fueled off of their failure. You know what I mean? Like feeling bigger than they are. And then just morals. You want somebody with the same kind of morals that you got. If a guy is, cheating on his wife, he might cheat on a knot too. You might not want to have this guy belaying you. You know what I mean? So I think all that's important. You just need good people that you have a good relationship with, who you fully trust each other with your lives, because that may very well be the case at some point in that trip. Your lives may be on the line, and you're going to have to trust each other with that. And also strong. You want the strongest people that you can find. So make sure that they're able to carry your weight and then some.
Yeah, I hear you. That's great advice. Thank you for sharing. And I think that's right. I think the big thing you said, right, is trust. And you pointed out trusting, and then the cheating. Are they gonna, if they're doing this in their own life, how's that gonna transfer over? Because the risks are really real when you guys are out there. I mean, it's basically life or death, especially if especially if they're with you and they're getting caught in the storms.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it sounds silly, but it's hard to find. It's hard to find partners in the mountains, because man, there's no shortage of egos in the mountains, and I've been guilty of it myself, man. I definitely had an ego at some point, and that ego got checked, and I learned lessons along the way, and I'm glad that I did, because I'm definitely a better teammate today than I would have been, 10 years ago. So.
Yeah, those ego checks are hard. I had one last year, and it was okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's good. I like the humbling experience, right? So,
Absolutely. Well, one thing also with just kind of going with team members and team dynamics and things, uh, just because somebody isn't pulling their weight physically, doesn't mean they can't, or just because they aren't pulling it literally doesn't mean they can't pull it figuratively. I mean, for example, if you're just really, something's off and you're feeling really tired and whatever, and you can't do this double carry on a day, it's okay to say, hey, I'm not feeling it and I need some help, and I'm going to need, I can't carry this weight up today. And it's okay for team members to take that weight and split it up amongst them and carry that load up. But while you're down at camp, you can be getting everything dialed. You know what I mean? Maybe you're not physically exerting yourself. Don't sit there and let it ruin your day. Don't feel bad about it. Think of things you can do while you're still recovering. You know what I mean? Chisel out the seats in the tent, on that floorless tent, so that people have a nice seat to sit on when they come back. Have water made, melt snow, have water made, have food, organize things in the tent. Just get everything organized while they're out. Just doing that stuff, you're pulling your weight too. You know what I mean? I've seen it, time and time again, where, and also if you're the teammate carrying that extra weight up, don't be sitting there, holding a grudge and talking trash about the guy that wasn't feeling good that day that stayed back either. It's a team effort, and everybody's got to do their part, but that part doesn't necessarily have to be what everybody else is doing. So just make sure you're making progress every day in some way to pull your weight, even if it's not literal weight.
yeah, right. Concentrate on the things you can control and the things you can't, and that's how it is. And like you said, you can still be useful, even if you're not the one carrying the weight or you're the one behind. It doesn't mean you can't do things.
Oh yeah. And also, if you're having a good day, and someone else is having a bad day, in the same regard, it's your time to step up and and recognize that if they aren't asking for help, and try to get them to let you help them too, and pick up a little extra weight that day, So, but yeah, no, it's cool. It's working as a team, definitely. If it's like they say, cliches, man. If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together, right?
Exactly. It's like the other one, what teamwork makes the dream work, that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
it is good to have a team. I mean, that's, if you want to correlate it to business, or you want to correlate, like, my classmates, I have like 4 guys that we study together. We stay at the Airbnbs together. Like, we're a team. We don't live in the same place, but we got each other's back. And maybe one day I understand something better than he does, and vice versa. So
Mhm.
that's how it goes.
Yep, absolutely. And the other thing with teammates is holding each other accountable too. You know what I mean? If you see someone that's not carrying their weight, you're going to have to be, if you're that person not carrying your weight, you're going to have to be open to some constructive criticism, because it needs to be called out, and it needs to be called out early on. And then you can adapt and move forward and address the situation openly. Uh, but yeah, no, lots of good stuff with team dynamic, and making sure you got good teammates for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing all that out for us and talking about that, especially when it comes to, mountaineering and the stuff you do. Like you mentioned before, it's life or death. And, kind of going off that, we've talked, all these big things you've done. And so I'm really kind of curious, after you've done Denali, you've done some other stuff, you got a documentary that might be coming out that we're hoping to hear about soon. Are there any other like big things currently, or maybe like some dream objectives that you want to kind of do in the future?
Man, I've got dreams for sure. I'd love to go. I mean, I guess like a bucket list thing. If there was one thing that I could do that I think would be probably the coolest objective, it's not the most technically demanding. It's not you wouldn't have to have the most skill to do it, but it seems like the most skiable of the 8,000-meter peaks, and I'd like to ski an 8,000-meter peak. Uh, it's something you look at and it just seems impossible, but yeah, no, that's the next challenge, next objective. I don't know how I would ever financially fund something like that, but if there was one thing on the list, it would be to climb and ski Choyoyu. So that would be an incredible experience, I think.
Well, Pete, with everything, I think you'll make it happen. I'm confident in that.
Yeah, well, and until then, I'm just gonna keep playing in my backyard and playing in these Cascades, and I'm just gonna keep training like Denali's happening next month, and that way I'm setting myself up to be lucky. So if something lines up and it falls in my lap, I'm ready.
Awesome. Well, Pete, thank you for, sharing your evening with us and telling us about all your incredible stories. I loved hearing everything about it. And, you're doing great things. And I definitely am going to look into the ROMP. That's a really good organization. So I'll definitely look into them. And I appreciate you, telling us about them. And we look forward to, we're anticipating the news about that documentary. I'm going to be looking out for that. And where can people follow you, like on Instagram or Facebook or anything like that? Kind of keep up with like what you're doing.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. That's about it. I actually don't get on Facebook very often, but I'll throw a post on Instagram every once in a while. I'm at PLP underscore McAfee, MCAFEE. That stands for Peg Leg Pete, in case you're wondering. So,
Perfect, man. Well, Pete, again, I appreciate it. It was a pleasure and honor just talking to you and getting to share an hour of your time this evening.
well, man, the honor is all mine. Thanks for having me on, Ben. I can't wait to listen to this podcast. So, appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.